Kellyanne, why don't you take over?
Thank you, and thank you, Bill. On November 2nd, California voters were asked to vote on Proposition 174, the school choice initiative in the Golden State. Prop 174 would have guaranteed each student, there are 5.3 million in our nation's most populous state, each student would have been guaranteed $2,600 in a voucher that their parents can choose to put toward their education in private or public school. Prop 174 was defeated 2-1 by the voters. But the good news is that the idea and the support for school choice is alive and well in California and other states. Let's take a look at the exit poll results. In looking at them, I believe there are 6 lessons to be learned by voters and legislators in California, as well as legislators across the country. Number 1, California voters voted against Prop 174, not against school choice. Simply put, Prop 174 frightened the voters. They feared that there would be a reduction in per pupil spending, and they feared that there would be David Koresh-type people who would be allowed to start schools unchecked and unaccredited. The ballot language and the assault by the school choice opponents engendered a fear in California voters that this would happen. Unfortunately, being outnumbered and outspent, it was very difficult for school choice and Prop 174 proponents to counter these attacks. Although Prop 174 frightened voters, school choice does not. A defeat of Prop 174 was not a ringing endorsement of the education establishment in California. In fact, in California, as we found across the country in our other polling data, people are very frustrated with the current state of our education system. There's a very pro-parent, pro-child sentiment, and there's a decreasing positive attitude to our teachers' unions and teachers' organizations. Lesson 2 is to be patient in California and elsewhere, because this can happen. Certain language that can go into the ballot initiative, certain legislative reforms that can occur, makes this a very, very viable issue electorally. In the school choice debate, you should be prepared for temporary setbacks on your way to a more fulsome victory. Lesson 3, I urge you, regardless of your state, start now. The school choice debate for the next year started the moment the polls closed in California, and it is not too early anywhere. Improvement of education is always a popular issue with the electorate. And in fact, as you'll see later, there's great political capital for you, state legislators, to have this as one of your target issues. Our 4th lesson is to be flexible and realistic. The flexible part is to, quite frankly, give the people what they want. If the certain demands are not met in California, for example, school choice will never pass there. Voters want to be assured that crazy people cannot start up schools where their children will attend, and they want to be assured that it's not going to cost them much more money, and they want to be assured that municipalities can opt out, that everyone will benefit, not just low-income students. And in terms of being realistic, California had an inherent problem of being too populous. As Bill will expound in a few moments, there's imminent passage of school choice in Connecticut. And so you can see, given the different sizes of the states and the population therein, that you may want to go for piecemeal, small victories on the way to a wholesale win later on. Define and clarify again and again. This is critical, and this is where Prop 174 got lost in California. Voters want to know, they want to be told exactly, precisely, what this means to them and their school children. And unfortunately, part of that is going to take money and vocalness and visibility of some type of leader. And I commend you to be that leader in your state. Voters want to know that what they're getting is something that's going to be improvement, not a risk. because if you're asking them to risk their children's education, even though they're frustrated with the status quo, they're not going to buy it. They'd rather keep what they know and not be completely thrilled with it than roll the dice on something so important. In doing this, you may want to consider going negative. This is something you can only find out in your own state through qualitative and quantitative survey research means, but in California, because they were assaulted so tremendously on the air and through the radios and even through their own Republican governor, Pete Wilson, they lacked an ability, due to lack of resources, to go negative, but it probably would have helped them to show why the teachers feared an improvement of education so greatly, because it directly cuts into what they're guaranteed. Doesn't necessarily mean it was bad for the school children. Lesson 6 is to do your homework. Stay apprised of legislative efforts in other states. ALEC is an indispensable source of this for you. Let them keep you abreast of what's going on in other states. Bill will expound on this thoroughly in a few moments for you. But also remember that even though Prop 174 and other school choice initiatives are losing at the ballot box, the idea of school choice is winning nationwide. At least in Minneapolis, Baltimore, and I saw in the Washington Post this week, the DC public school system are looking toward the private sector to help them get their system back into control. This is very auspicious to the school choice climate, because it helps you to understand that people are frustrated and governments are starting to have to admit to themselves and to their constituents that it's just not working. And we'll move along now quickly. As I said, school choice was defeated by a 2-to-1 margin. And when we asked people, when you voted for it, were you strongly for it or strongly against it? The intensity is high for both people. Those who voted knew the way they felt, and that's why they went to the ballot box in an election year where there was one thing to vote on: school choice. Of those who didn't go to the ballot box, nearly half opposed Prop 174 anyway. That seems like bad news. You'll see in a moment it's not so bad, because although they oppose Prop 174, they would support a different initiative in the future. You'll see that there's strong opposition among those who didn't vote, but if they really felt that dearly about the issue, they would have voted, and so there is room for movement there. This is a great statistic for California and for others who are trying to draft legislation for school choice. Among those who voted, they would be willing to, 57% would be willing to someday support a different initiative. These are people who voted against school choice this time, but they say if there are certain guarantees next time, they'll go for it. And among those who stayed home, it's a similar number. They'll run to the ballot box in support of school choice if they see something that has more guarantees than Prop 174 was giving them. These are the target groups, at least for California, but we've seen this again and again across the nation, because although lower income voters, lower educated voters, low socioeconomic status, and Hispanics, particularly those groups delineated there, in California, although they generally opposed 174, they are most likely, through our data, to support different school choice initiative in the future. And Bill and I have discussed in the past, perhaps this was because $2,600 in California would not have allowed them to go to the school of their choice anyway, because it wouldn't be supplementing their tuition money. They're probably exclusively dependent on that money for the school of their choice. But if they believe there's more money in the future and that they truly do have a choice, they'll support it. These are the groups that are going to be more difficult to move. These are the groups that either opposed 174 at the ballot box, don't support school choice, and say they probably never would. The problem is it's married with children and it's people who have children in public schools. These people are scared. They were frightened by 174 and they want to see something different. And here's how we know that. We asked California voters in the exit poll to grade the California education system. you'll see that 3 out of 4 people give the California system a C or less. 13% of California voters believe that the system is failing them, and they would give them an absolute F. You've got 1/3 of the voters giving it a D or an F. And significantly, although we see that public school parents would be very difficult to move in the future school choice support, 77% of them would give a C or below. So they're not thrilled with what they've got right now. They just want to see guarantees, and that's a very important word to you in the future. They want to see guarantees that it actually will be better. This hooks on to the last graph. If people are disgusted with the current education establishment, then it follows that they would generally support a parent's right to choose to use vouchers as to where to send their children to school. And we see that 53% of people do support that generally. There's a very pro-parent, pro-child sentiment across the nation. Of those who oppose, 1/4 strongly oppose. But again, remember, we're asking them a generic support question, yet their only encounter with school choice and parents' choice has been Prop 174. It's very difficult for them to get that out of their minds hours after casting their votes. The pro-parent, pro-child sentiment is carried through in this statistic. We asked, who do you believe is the most credible organization in education in California? And we listed out around 6 or 7 different ones. 1/3 of the voters vote for the California Parent Teachers Association, and that's a 2-to-1 endorsement over the California Teachers Association. So people want parents to be involved. They believe that parents have a right to choose what type of curriculum and what type of school their children are attending. And so goes Republican Governor Wilson's opposition to Prop 174. It didn't amount to a hill of beans in the vote. I don't know if he's seen this statistic, but it certainly is very important for the school choice movement in California and elsewhere. His vocal and visible opposition to the school choice initiative helped garner a great deal of bipartisan opposition to it. And this is a bipartisan issue, as you'll see in a moment, and as you should know in general. But of the 9 out of 10 people who said that his opposition to Prop 174 did not influence their vote, 85% say not at all, didn't consider it at all. Notwithstanding this, there is great political capital in state legislators who want to endorse school choice or make it their target issue. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the most important statistic that you can see today. I want you to take this away from today's session with myself and Bill, if nothing else. Voters will support, half of the voters are more likely to support and vote for a public official who supports school choice. And only 29% say they'd be less likely. And you'll see that the intensity for that is not very strong. The no difference and don't know refused are movable people, because they haven't made up their mind. They're not core supporters or opponents of a public official who supports school choice, and they are movement people. People want to see action by their legislators in allowing parents and children the right to choose where they're attending school. Generally, people don't believe this is a Republican idea or a Democrat idea in California, which is great, because this has a great potential to be a bipartisan issue. Bill will tell you in a moment that we're getting a great deal of support from Democratic legislators across the country, and that in Connecticut alone, that will probably be the linchpin that allows the first initiative to pass. Then we asked a series of push questions. We said, voters, if X, Y, and Z were true, or if X, Y, and Z were guaranteed to you, do you agree or disagree that you would be more likely to support choice in education? We asked 5 of them. The first one, I would support choice in education in the future if it did not cost any more money. 2/3 of the people agree with that. With some significant intensity, nearly half of the electorate strongly agrees that they will support it if it didn't cost any more money. And you'll see that in some states it won't. But voters in California weren't aware of this. There was no communication of the message that underlied the initiative provisions. This was the most movement issue to the California electorate, the 5 that we asked. I would support choice in education if it were guaranteed that per pupil funding would not be reduced. In California, I believe it would not have been. But voters didn't know that, and 3/4 of the population said they would support it if it were not reduced. Well, 3/4 of the population did not support Prop 174. We need to bridge that gap between reality, the initiative, and perception, what people believe it is going to create. It's a very significant statistic, and I commend you that if you do go after this as one of your target issues in your respective states, that you make sure you communicate to the voters, per pupil funding will not be touched. However, even given all the economic analyses in this data, people are not interested in having it only targeted to lower income students. Obviously, lower income and low socioeconomic status voters disagreed with this statistic, but generally only 1/4 of the population in California wants it to be a voucher that only helps those who need it most. People want this to go across the board, and it is a viable provision for it to affect every public and private school student in your states. 1/2 of the electorate is interested in allowing separate municipalities, cities or towns, to opt out of school choice vouchers if they would like. This all goes to the whole pro-choice sentiment, the pro-parent, pro-child, the right to choose. They believe that the right to choose should transcend on the state level, or the city and town level, pardon me, and allow different cities or towns whose education systems are working locally to opt out if they would like. It's not a significant number, but it is 1/2. It's not a big push issue. The next one, however, is, and here we get back to the David Koresh fear, 7 out of 10 people agree that they would be more likely to support choice in education in the future if there are adequate and effective safeguards against extremists setting up school. As it read, the California ballot initiative would have allowed you and me and my puppy to start a school. And people thought this, and they believed it, and this hurt. This hurt Prop 174 very, very gravely. But it wasn't the case. It's not the case. We just need to I commend you to put the ballot the language right into your initiative, if you must, that this will allow you certain guarantees against this happening. And the last graph just shows you how those 5 push questions came out in the end. And what was most important, that's of a total, the highest score you can have there is a 4. And you have funding not, per pupil funding not be reduced to the 3.2, and you go all the way down to target low income only, not even a 2, not even half, 1 out at 1.9. So what does this mean to you as state legislators? The California lessons provide us with information for every state. It's not unique to California. You need to make this a target issue because, remember, improvement of education and improvement of children's welfare is never an unpopular issue. And an opponent to your idea to improve education and make our schools better and safer for our students is going to have a very tough row to hoe to oppose you on that, to try to convince voters that that's not something that they should be concerned about, and that's not a prudent expenditure of state money. The 3 things that I see are absolutely tantamount to successful passage of a school choice initiative are clear and comprehensible ballot language. Avoid ambiguity. As an attorney, I feel comfortable in saying that maybe you shouldn't get your attorneys too involved in drafting the language. Make it speak to the people. Make it speak to common lay people. You secondly need a message to the voters, and that message is merely just a restatement of what underlies the ballot initiative. What is it providing? What does it mean? And the third part is to clearly communicate that message to all of your voters, broad-based, in a way that either preempts the assault from the other side or sufficiently responds to it. Because that's what happened in California, and that's what happens in general when you're outspent and outnumbered. And finally, get a visible spokesperson. I hope it will be each of you. I hope it will be each of you in your own states. but it certainly doesn't hurt to get your federal legislators involved, some teachers who may support school choice, even though teachers in general do not. And with that in mind, I'll turn it over to Bill. I commend you to get involved. It's a very important issue, and I thank you for your time and attention this morning.